At 0542, the terminal at Denver International buzzed with the kind of tired motion only early morning flights inspire. Business travelers moved like machines, clutching paper cups and half-zipped laptop bags. Couples in fleece hoodies leaned on one another, while toddlers whined, tugging against stroller straps. Gate A27 was no different. People filled every seat, eyes glued to phones, voices low, movements automatic. No one noticed her when she walked up. She stood off to the side, alone, back straight, chin slightly dipped. Her jacket was a faded gray, zipped halfway. Her jeans were dark and clean, not too new, not too worn. A plain canvas bag hung diagonally across her shoulder. She wore smoke-colored glasses that could have been prescription or not, and she didn't take them off once. When they called boarding group 3, she moved forward with the rest. Not too fast, not slow, just enough to blend in. The gate agent barely looked at her, scanned her boarding pass without a word. She nodded once. Row 9A. No reaction, no smile, no questions, just motion. She walked past the first-class cabin, eyes sweeping the rows like a scan, pausing for no more than half a second on the cockpit door. Something registered there. Not curiosity, familiarity. Then she kept moving. The aircraft was a 737-800. She didn't glance at the seat numbers. She didn't need to. Without breaking stride, she reached row 9 and slipped into the window seat. Her bag went under the seat ahead in one motion. Her back rested against the leather cushion. Hands folded loosely in her lap. She didn't look out the window. She didn't look at anyone. She simply waited. Passengers continued to trickle in. A man in a tailored blazer and wireless earbuds settled into 9B beside her. He didn't say a word. Neither did she. Across the aisle, 2 college-aged guys laughed about their protein bars and windowless gyms. 3 rows back, a baby began to cry, then stopped. Overhead, bins slammed. Crew voices buzzed through routine checks. She remained motionless. No earbuds, no book, no phone. Not even the usual glance at the safety card or buckle. She sat like she'd done this 1,000 times. Like the seat wasn't new. Like the airplane was something that belonged to her in a way no one else on board could claim. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, checking belts, counting rows, nodding in rhythm. 0644. Doors closed. Engines began to hum with that steady vibration that builds behind the bones. If anyone had looked at her closely, they might have sensed it. The way she sat just slightly forward on the seat, the way her shoulders remained squared but relaxed, the absence of fidgeting. Most people waited to leave. She, somehow, seemed like she'd already arrived. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft taxied out toward the runway. She blinked once, not in boredom, but like a reset, the kind you do before focus kicks in. At 06:53, wheels lifted off. Denver's skyline dropped away into cloud-streaked light. A new day, a new altitude. And still, no one looked at her. But if they had, they wouldn't have seen fear. They wouldn't have seen excitement. They would have seen the strangest thing to find on a morning flight to Atlanta. Readiness. At 07:02, the first jolt hit hard. Not the light bounce that wakes you up or makes you glance at the seatbelt light. This was sharper, like the aircraft caught something it wasn't meant to. Overhead bins creaked. A few gasps echoed through the cabin. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere near row 12, a toddler began to whimper. The man in 9B straightened in his seat, shifting his eyes toward the window, then toward the aisle, unsure which held more answers. Across from him, one of the college kids went quiet mid-sentence. The engines sounded louder now, not in volume, but in tone. Something had shifted. The whine of the right engine had a slight stagger, like it was compensating for something. She didn't move. Her fingers, still resting on her lap, curled slightly, then released. Calm wasn't the right word. Calculating was closer. She blinked slowly, and then leaned forward, slipping a thin black notebook from the front pocket of her canvas bag. She opened it to a blank page and began to sketch. The lines she drew weren't abstract. They were schematic, cross-section diagrams of the aircraft's rear fuselage, actuator linkages, and airflow vectors. Each pencil stroke was purposeful. She began by plotting out the elevator assembly, drawing a faint arc from the stabilizer to the actuator mount. Her hand moved fast, but not rushed. She'd drawn this before, more than once. A flight attendant passed by, paused at row 9, and looked down. The woman didn't lift her head. She didn't acknowledge her. After a second of hesitation, the attendant moved on. The sketch was already taking form. She added a note beneath the stabilizer sketch left yaw, asymmetric bleed pattern. Then she underlined it. The cabin lights flickered again. The aircraft pitched left slightly, then corrected. Gasps rose louder this time. One man a few rows back muttered something under his breath, and someone else reached for the call button. The co-pilot's voice came over the speaker, calm but tight. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing minor turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." But it wasn't turbulence. Not by how the plane moved. Not by how she tracked the vibration pattern through the seatback. There was a delay between the pitch and the engine correction. Just enough to feel, just enough to mean something deeper. The kind of misalignment that pointed to control, surface latency. Not normal. Not safe. She glanced out the window now. Just once. A thin line of condensation trailed behind the right horizontal stabilizer. It was barely visible in the early morning light. But to her, it said everything. The actuator was off balance, not broken. Worse, intermittent. Which meant it could misfire at altitude, respond late, or worse, lock out. She flipped to a new page and drew another diagram, this one smaller, more technical. She sketched the actuator override assembly, with a dashed line through the hydraulic feedback circuit. Her pencil paused on the relay switch. She drew a question mark beside it. Then, beneath that, one word: drift. Another bump, sharper, enough to make someone in the aisle cry out. The man beside her flinched and looked over. She didn't return his glance. She only adjusted her grip on the pencil and continued drawing. When the lights dimmed briefly again, she didn't even blink. The man leaned closer, his voice low. "Do you fly?" Her head turned slightly, but she didn't answer. She drew a line connecting two components and then tapped twice at the page with the eraser. There was no time to explain. Not yet. She wasn't ready to be seen, but the aircraft was speaking, and she was already listening. The sketchbook closed with a soft click. She slid it back into the bag. Then she sat still again, hands folded, eyes forward. The seatbelt sign chimed a second time. The lights steadied. But inside row 9, the only steady thing was her. Only she knew what came next. And for now, she waited. The second jolt was worse than the first. At 0709, the aircraft lurched hard enough to shake the oxygen masks loose from their compartments. Overhead bins popped open. A laptop skidded across the aisle. Screams broke out in pockets. The plane dropped for a full second before correcting. Flight attendants stumbled, clutching seatbacks, eyes wide with forced calm. In the cockpit, alarms layered over one another. The co-pilot scanned the panels, his voice tense, left yaw increasing, elevator feedback inconsistent. He reached toward the throttle, then paused. His eyes caught movement on the cabin camera feed. The screen showed row 9, specifically, seat 9A. The woman had shifted slightly, reaching across her lap. Her sleeve had slipped just far enough to reveal her wrist. Not fully. Just enough. The light above her seat flickered, and for a moment, the tattoo became clear. A circle. Inside it, a stylized winged insignia. Underneath, the call sign, Raven 6. The co-pilot went still. His breath caught. He reached over and tapped the captain's arm. "Sir, look at 9A. The captain squinted at the screen. His face changed. The tension didn't spike. It hollowed, like something cold had passed through him. His fingers hovered above the PA toggle, hesitated, then pressed down. "Cabin, this is your captain. If Raven 6 is on board, we need your help." For 2 full seconds, nothing happened. Then heads began to turn. Passengers looked down their rows, then toward the front. Some confused, others alert. And then everyone saw her. Seat 9A. The woman with the blank expression and unreadable eyes. She didn't move right away to worry. She waited 1 heartbeat longer than expected. Then she stood. No words. No questions. No signal. She slid into the aisle with quiet precision. Her boots touched the floor with barely a sound. The man beside her stared, mouth open. Someone 2 rows up whispered something that never finished. She walked forward, steady and controlled. The path opened before her like instinct, like gravity shifted for her. No one dared move, not even the crew. The moment she passed the cockpit threshold, the air changed, not in pressure, in presence. Like the aircraft knew she was there. And somehow, it mattered. She stepped into the cockpit without hesitation. The door clicked shut behind her, sealing off the noise of the cabin. The air was thick with tension and the sharp scent of overheated plastic. Red and amber lights scattered across the control panel like warnings in code. The captain shifted in his seat but didn't speak. The co-pilot kept his hands frozen above the thrust levers. She didn't ask for permission. She moved behind the co-pilot's chair, dropped to one knee, and scanned the panels from bottom up. No wasted glances. Her eyes paused for less than 2 seconds on each set of instruments. Airspeed drift. Trim indicator fluctuating. Left, engine pressure balanced. But pitch control was erratic. Her hand hovered above the annunciator panel, then tapped twice on a rotary switch. "It's not engine. Your flight control logic is receiving a corrupted input from the elevator actuator. The redundancy system's feeding false data into pitch trim. That's why you're getting yaw drift." She pointed at the pitch feedback gauge. The value's pulsing around center mom. But the correction response is too fast. That means the servo loop isn't working. It's guessing. The co-pilot blinked. "That doesn't even show up on the diagnostic tree." She nodded. "It will. You're 70 seconds away from complete trim divergence. You'll lose stable pitch and enter forced nose-down correction. It'll look like turbulence until you can't recover." She reached under the console and pulled out the manual override chart. With one glance, she pointed to a line item at the bottom. "You've still got flow authority through the tail junction. I can bypass the actuator if I get to the panel near the aft access. But once I'm back there, you won't hear from me. I'll be below sensor coverage." The captain opened his mouth, but no sound came. He looked at the patch on her forearm. He had no doubt now. She didn't wait. Flashlight, harness, and access tools. Lock the path behind me. No one follows. Then she turned toward the exit. The aircraft hadn't changed yet. But her presence had. And the flight crew knew it. At 0713, she dropped through the rear service hatch behind the aft galley, crouching low into the dim access tunnel that ran beneath the cabin. The air was tight with heat and metallic scent. Vibrations pulsed through the skin of the fuselage. Louder here, closer to the source Cree. She moved fast, knowing this route by memory, counting structural ribs as she passed them. Just forward of bulkhead 68A, she found the maintenance panel for the tail servo access. She flicked open the latch covers in order: top right, bottom left, center catch, then rotated the locking lever to disengage the internal lock pin. With both hands, she pulled the panel open and clicked on her penlight, locking it into her collar. Wires and tubing filled the cavity, but she went straight to the primary pitch control bus. The feedback signal conduit was visibly worn, and the secondary coil bore signs of thermal stress. The insulation sheath had a crack, likely from prolonged exposure to actuator vibration. She traced the line down to the terminal block where servo return signals cycled back into the flight control computer. One of the return pins flickered intermittent contact. That was her problem. She reached into her side pouch and pulled out a handheld field circuit bypass unit. The device was custom military issue, the kind used for in-theater maintenance on rotary wing platforms. She stripped back a half-inch of the signal wire, clipped it into the red diagnostic clamp, and waited for signal pulse sync. It took 3 seconds. Then she toggled the override loop and set the device to passive trace mode, signal frequency normalized by 0714. Now came the hard part. Bypassing a faulty actuator meant rerouting through the backup coil without tripping the logic comparator. She pulled a secondary coil insert from her pack, set it into the mid-panel anchor point, and spliced it between the output bus and the new input path. The housing clicked in with a clean lock, one wrong angle, and the system would register a fault and reset. She didn't miss. The heat increased as the aircraft banked slightly. She felt it before she saw it. Slight pitch dip. Autopilot struggling to compensate. She locked the new coil housing into place, then manually clipped a strain relief band around the assembly, preventing vibration-induced slack. She ran the final check signal return delay within tolerance, load circuit stable, and elevator bias cleared. At 0715, she tapped the base of the panel once, a habit from older aircraft ritual more than function. Then she closed the hatch, secured the latches in reverse order, and backed out. Her suit was streaked with grime, her fingers burned from insulation rub. But she moved fast, retracing steps toward the cabin. She didn't pause to breathe. The plane was flying, but not yet safe. The fix was in place. Now came the descent. At 0717, she re-entered the cockpit, her sleeves streaked with dust, face glistening with heat. She didn't sit. She leaned between the two pilots, eyes locked on the multifunction display. The radar was alive with red and yellow bands ahead. Thunderstorm cells. She pointed at a thin vertical gap on the left edge of the screen. That's your window. It'll last less than 2 minutes. You hit it. You drop to FL 180. You miss it. We go straight into turbulence with a destabilized actuator. The captain gave her a look. You're sure she didn't blink? I didn't crawl through a tail cone to guess. She slid her hand to the throttle quadrant and tapped the manual pitch trim wheel. Set your pitch at 2 degrees nose down. Maintain 145 knots. Forget the autopilot. It won't compensate in time. You need to feel the load. He nodded and disengaged the autopilot. The yoke stiffened as he took manual control. The aircraft nose dipped slightly. Speed bled off, then stabilized at 145. She turned the yaw trim manually, balancing the roll with short, exact inputs. The left rudder pulled harder than expected. She compensated with steady pressure. Flaps to 30, she said. The co-pilot adjusted the lever. A low mechanical whine filled the cockpit. The plane slowed just enough to hug the lift curve without stalling. She tracked the crosswind data. Pressure differential on the right side was rising. She corrected. Again. Pulling the rudder trim to neutral and giving a quarter turn left. The plane stabilized. On radar, the weather corridor narrowed. One pulse of lightning flared dead ahead, still outside their path. She leaned in, watching the Doppler return. We've got a smooth pocket at vector 123 altitude window, $17,000 to 18,200. Turn left 3 degrees. Now. The captain adjusted. The nose shifted. Clouds surrounded them in every direction. Visibility dropped, but the aircraft leveled perfectly. Airspeed held, heading locked. At 0719, the shaking stopped. For exactly 2 minutes, the 737 flew through calm, Untouched air, no bumps, no sound but engine hum and radio static. The window held. She said nothing, just watched the radar. At 07:21, turbulence returned behind them, but they were already through. She finally exhaled. That was the only window we had. There won't be another. The co-pilot stared at her, stunned. The captain just whispered, "Copy that." At 07:52, the main gear touched the runway. The tires kissed the asphalt with a muted thump. Not the jolt most passengers braced for. Reverse thrust kicked in. The aircraft slowed with steady, measured force. The captain kept both hands on the yoke, eyes fixed ahead. Every move was textbook, but his breathing was different. Slower. Heavier. The runway lights blurred past as the plane rolled to a stop at the outer taxiway. Then the engines quieted. Not shut down. Just idle. The aircraft was safe. They had made it. No one clapped. There were no cheers. No sighs of relief. No chatter bursting back to life. Just silence. Not the kind born of fear, but something heavier, reverent. Dozens of passengers turned, not toward the cockpit, but back. Row 9A, the seat by the window. She was there again. Somehow, between turbulence and touchdown, she'd returned to her place, her hands folded neatly, her glasses still on. She stared ahead, unmoving, as if she'd never left, as if the past 20 minutes hadn't happened. But they had, and everyone in that cabin knew it. The captain looked through the cockpit door. He couldn't see her anymore, but he didn't need to. The image was already burned into him. He and the co-pilot exchanged no words, just a shared glance, not of disbelief, of understanding. The cabin remained still, even as the crew unbuckled and moved softly through the aisles. No announcements, no reminders. The silence held, not from fear or confusion, but from respect. She had saved them, and somehow they all felt it, without ever hearing her name. At 08:06, she stepped off the jet bridge with the same pace she'd used boarding, unhurried, exact, deliberate. The morning air inside the terminal was warmer, humid from the storm system just cleared. Passengers behind her stayed close to the walls, letting her pass without being told. No one made eye contact. He was waiting 30 feet from the gate. Dark gray suit, cropped hair, no badge visible, but his posture said everything. His hands were at his sides, not crossed, not in pockets. His eyes scanned once, locked onto her. He nodded as she approached. "Ma'am, there's a car waiting." She didn't pause, just returned the nod. I expected this. They walked together. No words, no confirmation. No one stopped them. TSA agents nearby glanced once, then looked away. A gate agent lowered her radio without realizing why. It wasn't just presence. It was authority. The kind that doesn't need a uniform or orders. Down the service corridor, past restricted access, the doors slid open. No one asked for ID, no clipboard, no clearance badge, just space cleared as they moved. One ground crew member stepped aside mid-conversation, not realizing why his chest tightened. Outside, a black SUV idled at the curb. No markings, no license plate up front. The driver stood with one hand on the door handle, back straight. She stepped in without looking back. The door shut. The man in the suit lingered half a second longer, then followed. As he entered, he spoke just once, low and steady. "You still fly." She turned her head just enough, not as often, but I never forgot how. The car pulled away, no escort, no sirens, just gone. And by the time the rest of the airport noticed the plane had landed, she was already out of sight. The facility was buried in the Nevada basin, miles from the nearest road that showed up on maps. Its perimeter fence was rusted in places, but the interior told a different story. Clean floors, locked cabinets, the faint hum of systems still alive. At 11:24, She stepped through the west hangar entrance. Her boots echoed as she crossed the floor. Colonel Elijah Maddox stood waiting near the old flight planning room, still in uniform. Silver hair buzzed close, boots polished. He didn't salute. He didn't need to. He just looked at her, jaw tight, eyes sharp. "You took your damn time." She stopped 3 feet from him. "I wasn't planning on coming back." He nodded once. Nobody does. Until they're needed. He reached into a side drawer and pulled out a black recorder, pressed play. At first, only static. Then a cockpit voice. Calm, clipped, target locked, stabilizing fire vector. 20mm ready, commencing pass. Her own voice. Maddox folded his arms. Syria, July 2017. You were the only one who saw the ambush coming. The other squad was 20 seconds from walking into it blind. You flew a Warthog with one engine and a shattered HUD. Put that thing between them and a full mortar team. Saved 12. She said nothing, just stared at the recorder. They gave you the citation. Then you vanished. No interview, no debrief, not even a flight log. You didn't quit. Raven. You just walked out and left the rest of us to remember. And we did. He paused the recorder, turned to face her fully. What you did today, that wasn't luck. That was you. Still flying. You can say you're done, but you're not out. Not yet. Outside, a pair of F-16s roared overhead, low, fast. She didn't look up. Her eyes stayed on Maddox. It's not about flying, she said. It's about who gets left in the sky when no one else answers. He nodded slowly. That's why I kept the lights on here, in case you ever came back. By 12:07, the room had emptied. Just 2 chairs, a desk, and the desert humming beyond the glass. Maddox stayed seated, arms resting on his thighs. Voice lower now. You know what happens next, don't you? She didn't answer, just looked at the edge of the desk. The scarring in the wood was still there, same as the day she left. Someone's been digging into ghost records. He said, not official, not even from inside. I've seen shadow assets move before. This is cleaner, smarter. They're not just looking for the program, they're trying to reassemble it. She blinked once, then leaned back in the chair. They don't have your access, Maddox continued. But your name came up the second that 737 declared an incident. Too clean, too precise. They know you're not retired. Not really. I never told anyone. She said, not even you. He looked at her. You didn't have to. That's the problem. You're still Raven 6, and someone out there wants her back in the air. She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke softly. I'm not hiding. That's not what worries me, Maddox said. What worries me is if someone actually calls, if the right voice asks the right question, you'll go. She didn't deny it. Just kept staring out the window. The silence stretched between them. Maddox stood, walked to the file cabinet, and pulled out a sealed manila envelope. He didn't hand it to her, just left it on the desk. When she finally looked at him, he saw it. That flicker, not fear, not regret. The kind of awareness you only see in people who've been hunted before. She wasn't running. He shook his head once. If someone really calls you back in, we both know you'll answer. Neither of them said the rest. They didn't need to. At Aero 812, the terminal buzzed with morning movement. Families gathered at baggage claim. Agents wheeled carts through polished floors. She walked with steady steps, duffel slung over one shoulder, eyes forward. But behind her, about 10 paces back, a boy followed. He was maybe 9, too quiet to be noticed, a little pale from the flight, but steady on his feet. He kept his distance, close enough to track her, far enough to pretend he wasn't. His small hands were balled at his sides. He'd watched her from the moment she stepped off the plane. She paused near the exit doors where the glass turned gold from sunlight, turned her head just enough to catch his reflection, then turned fully. He froze. You lost, she asked, voice soft but clear. He shook his head. Not exactly. She crouched to meet his eye level. The people around them passed like shadows. The world moved, but the space between them was still. He spoke quietly. "Were you the one who saved us?" She didn't answer right away, just studied his face. The fear had faded. What was left was something deeper. Wonder. Gratitude. A kind of knowing kids aren't supposed to have yet. "I saw you," he whispered. "Everyone else was scared, but you weren't. You walked into the front, and then everything worked again." She gave a half smile, tired but real. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you an angel?" She let out the faintest breath. Not quite a laugh, more like something breaking loose inside. "No," she said, "but I used to fly with them." His eyes widened. He didn't understand all of it, but he felt it. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled something small, black metal, warm from her body heat. She pressed it into his hand. It was a coin, heavy, simple. One side bore the silhouette of a raven in flight. The other held 3 letters and a number in small, etched print. Raven 6. SVR. He turned it over slowly, like it meant more than he could put words to. "You keep that," she said. "When you're scared, when you're strong, doesn't matter. Just don't forget what you survived." He gripped the coin tighter. She stood. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer. She stepped back into the flow of the terminal, into the sea of ordinary lives. The boy didn't chase her. He just watched until she faded behind moving crowds and steel beams. Then he looked down at the coin once more, closed his hand around it, and smiled. Some say she never existed. No passenger manifest listed her name. No surveillance captured her face. The airline denied any record of her boarding, and the crew refused interviews. But whispers remained, not from tabloids, but from those who were there. The press called her the Phantom Aviator, a woman in seat 9A who walked into the cockpit and brought down a broken plane, then vanished into the crowd. Experts debated the plausibility. Pilots called it impossible. But not all of them. One captain, who flew that day, still checks row 9 before every takeoff. He doesn't say her name, just pauses, then closes the cabin door. Some of the younger crew don't understand. The older ones know better. Not everything leaves a trace. Several passengers wrote about it in forums, under usernames no one recognized. They described the quiet confidence, the way she moved, the black coin she gave to a boy near baggage claim. None could agree on her face, but all remembered the silence she left behind. That boy. He's grown now. Wears a flight suit with silver wings. The first time he took the left seat of a T6, he tucked something into his chest pocket. A coin, worn smooth at the edges. On the ground. No one noticed. But in the cockpit, during every pre-flight ritual, he holds it for just a second longer. And before throttle up, he whispers to no one, "I used to fly with angels." They say legends are built on fiction, that real life doesn't make space for ghosts. But some stories don't ask to be believed. They just stay, like echoes from a storm, or the faint pressure of someone sitting quietly beside you, watching, waiting. Seat 9A is empty now, but for a few who remember, it never really is.